So hello everybody, ConvertWithMoss version 14 is out. So if you have never heard about this tool, it's a totally free and open source multi-sample converter which allows you to convert between different formats on Windows, Mac OS as well as Linux. And a feature many people were bugging me about is now implemented in version 14, which is a command line interface or short CLI. Yeah, why is that useful? It's useful if you are a sound designer who creates sample packs and then you need to distribute and convert this to multiple other formats and you need to do that repeatedly. You don't want to mess with the user interface all the time, or you might have different configuration settings, and you can put these things now in one batch file and convert into multiple formats in one go. So let's have a look at how this works, but first let's have a look how to install the software and how to access the command line on the different operating systems. Let's start out here on macOS. I downloaded here the zip file which contains the installer, the DMG, and we double click it, click on go, and then we need to do this drag and drop thing to put it into the application folder. And if that is done, we run the application and we'll get this very weird warning that this is very, very bad software. And there's no option to fix that here in the dialog. So we need to go here to the system settings, search for privacy and security settings, which is also, yeah, here it is. And on the right, you need to scroll down right to the bottom, and there is an option to run this anyway. And this is what we do. And again, he points us to destroy it, but we want to install it. You need to give your password. And finally, we are ready to go. And here is ConvertWithMoss in version 14. But how do we access now the command line? So let's close that down and we need to locate the application again here in the application folder, and we can close down all that stuff to make that a little bit more easier to see for you. And let's also get rid of that. And okay, so now let's open here the content of this application and also go into the contents folder and in the Mac OS folder, and there is finally the application. And let's open a command prompt here. And yeah, let's run this. And if you do so, it will bring up the normal user interface, but that's not what we want. So if you give any parameters, it will switch automatically to the console mode. For example, let's give a -H to show up the help. And this help will show you all the parameters you have here for ConvertWithMoss and what to do with that. But more on that later. Let's switch over to Linux. And on Linux, I also downloaded the installer, and here you can execute it. Click on install. We need to give the password to install it, and then it does its thing. And when we are ready, you can have a look at the application, and let's close that down. Let's close down that as well. It's located on the opt, so in the opt folder, and we can do that here. Open a console as well and do the same as we just did on Mac OS, and let's run the application. And that's basically the same. If you don't give any parameters, you will end up with the normal user interface. Can close it down and you can ignore this warning, it's not relevant. And if you go give the -H command for help, you will get the same information. And let's finally switch over to Windows. On Windows, I also did download the installer, and let's have a look at that. And it's an MSI installer. Let's unzip that as well, bring it over here and run that. Next, accept everything. Here we go. I had a previous install, so let's override that. And we are done. Yeah, let's locate the executable, and it's located in the programs folder, in the ConvertWithMoss folder. And here we have now two applications. The thing is, if I added a command line interface to the normal application, it would open two windows, which I found pretty ugly, and we don't want to have that. So I create a separate app, which is basically the same program, but it will open also this console window. So if you do the normal user interface things, just use the normal application as usual, but for the command line interface you need to use the second one. Let's show you that. If we open here a command shell and we would run the normal application with a -h, you would not see anything because there's no console attached. But if we run the CLI version, you will get the output as well. And for sure, you can do that in all of the different shells that are now available on Windows. Let's go here to the latest PowerShell, and we can do basically the same there. And we will get also here the output. But let's have a look what all these attributes are doing. So we have a number of attributes. We need to give what the destination format is, and we need to select the source format from which we want to convert it. And you can select to create presets or performances. And you have a couple of parameters you can add, and then you need to give the source folder as well as the destination folder. But let's start with an example. I have here a test folder which contains a contact multi, which we will use here for the example, and we ignore the second test file. Let's switch back to the console. Oh, we have two, so let's close that. So we have here our console, and let's do that. We have here ConvertWithMoss CLI, and there we need to add the source format, which we will use NKI, so contact format. And if you wonder why you see all these parameters, it's because I ran this before, and the console here will remember what you typed before. And if you just press the right arrow, you can recall all these parameters and run it pretty quickly. So, but let's go with 1010 music output format. And we have here our source folder, and we also pick here this output folder as a destination folder. So that's the minimum thing you need to have here, to have the source format, the destination format, and the output folder. And as you saw, it runs here the conversion process. The log will be pretty similar to what you have in the normal user interface. And here's our output folder, and it did create 1010 music output preset XML files for each of the multi-samples which were contained in the contact multi. Yeah, let's get rid of that and let's try something else. Let's clear that and we can see that easier. For example, if you only want to analyze it, so have a go. If the source format is fine and there are no errors, you can do that as well with a -a, and you will get some okays if everything went fine and there will nothing be written to the output except the log file. So let's try something else. Let's create now performances. And to do so, we choose a different destination format. We choose now the Yamaha format, which is short YSFC. And we will choose as the output type now performance. So the default was preset, and we add now the different one, the performance. And we want even create a library from that, and we call the library Arilyn. So as soon as you give this -l, it will create a library. And since we still have the analysis tag, it will only have a test run, but we can remove the -a and do the real thing. And this will then write here the resulting library file, which we have here in our output folder now. But how can you find out which source and destination formats are available? And you simply can type some nonsense here like XXX, and if you run it, then it will tell you which are the available source formats like Ableton, MPC, EX24, SFZ, and so on. So the same, which are also in the user interface. And you can do the same thing here for the destination format, also type some nonsense there, and then you will get the info, which are the available destination formats, which are pretty identical to the ones as the source format. The only difference is that you have wave as the output only, but this sample file as the input format. So far, we only use default values, but you can also use all the parameters you have in the user interface as well. And you give them with the -p command, and there you set key and values with an equal sign in between them. And to find out what they are, you also just type some nonsense behind -p command, and then it will tell you which parameters are actually available for the source format as well as for the destination format. I think from the names, they are pretty understandable what they are doing. You can just compare them with the user interface to find out what they do. And if they are on-off checkbox in the user interface, then this will be a Boolean parameter, which can be 0 or 1, and texts are text. So you simply type them the key value pair. And let's try that with 1010 music instead, which has some more parameters so we can test what the variables are. So let's try here to do a setting for a default creator, so a metadata value, and we need to type that, let's say, yeah, Klaus Meyer is our creator, our default creator. And this will not work because of the space, but nevertheless, let's have a look, and we get an error. And what you need to do to fix that is you need to put that in quotes. So if you have strings which have spaces, you need to use quotes. So let's try that. And we still have an error. And what's wrong with that? Okay, so I accidentally deleted the -p. So let's add that again, -p. Yeah, here it is. And now it will do the conversion process with these updated parameters. But if you want to add more than one, you can simply concatenate them with a comma. And let's have here, for example, let's say we want to resample the output to 24-bit 48 kilohertz. It will be resampled all the time to these values because they are the optimum for 1010 music output files. And yeah, the conversion process will also run then with these two updated parameters. Yeah, let's have a look again at the available attributes. What did we not discuss? So we had the analyze, we had the source and destination format. Flat is if you don't want to replicate the hierarchy of folders. If you have multiple subfolders, it will not clone them, but instead put all the result files into a flat directory. And then we have help, library, and rename is basically this rename feature we also have in the user interface, that you can rename some names automatically. And the only thing I did not show yet is the version. So you can have the -V, and there you get the version of the ConvertWithMoss software, which is now 14. Woo, so much for the command line interface. Also watch my other video about version 14, which shows lots of stuff I did in the performance domain. And yeah, what do you think about it? Tell me down in the comments, and until next time, make some